Good day to you as we begin our second week of class and our second third of the class, if you want to look at it that way, as things are moving along very quickly. And is there a better holiday than Christmas that embodies the capitalist framework and what it means to our culture? I mean, whether you're a religious person or not, I'm not a religious person, but I'm engulfed in Christmas like many other people. I have stockings on my chimney. I'm not going to be going to church over Christmas. I'm not going to be celebrating any of the religious side of it, but I'm caught up in the Christmas side of it. And for many of you, you're doing the same thing. And is there a better embodiment of taking a holiday that would otherwise be a religious holiday and making it a cultural celebration of commodification, of purchasing things? I mean, even the very idea of stockings, which are holding some of the gifts, are things that we are purchasing. I mean, the idea of a stocking was a sock that was hung up on a chimney. It's folklore, right, for the kids. You put something in there that's, you can barely afford in the 1800s. It's a sock on a chimney. And today, nobody has a sock on their chimney. Not a single person in this class, I'm quite certain, has a sock. You have a store-bought stocking. And the stocking may even be decorated. And you may even have a store-bought name tag. And inside of that stocking is going to be loaded with presents that are appropriately considered to be stocking stuffers. They're the right size. They don't cost too much, which would put them in a different category under the tree. Listen, I am not trying to ruin your Christmas. I'm not. Critical theory does not try to bring people down. It tries to provide insight. And that's what we're continuing on in this class. As we head into our second week here, we're taking on a second section of the book as well. The first section had to do with foundations, theoretical foundations built on sociological concepts for the most part and communication concepts to build a framework for really analyzing from a critical standpoint social media. Now we're moving into a second phase of the book, which has to do with applications. And you get a lot more information today on Facebook, on Twitter, even on Pinterest, which we haven't even mentioned in this class. So this chapter starts to dig deeper and deeper in getting into the application side of critically examining social media. And the title of it is The Power and Political Economy of Social Media. Sorry, I fumbled that there. The Power and Political Economy of Social Media. We examined power in the last chapter. Now we're extending our work, our theoretical work in that area towards specific social media. We're going to look at their political economy. The political economy analyzes the structural features of capitalism, which includes the crisis mode of capitalism. Yeah, crisis is something that capitalism goes through. It's built into the system, an economic crisis we look at it as, but it's much more than that. It's crisis. And so political economy is looking at politics and it's looking at the economy to try and get at the structural features of capitalism. And as part of our study, we have to take a look at ideology. Ideology is a term that we've used before. It comes about from that Frankfurt School, comes about from Marx. Ideology examines claims that are made about reality. It examines claims that are made about reality. And in the context of this course, what we're examining claims-wise is those claims of optimism about Web 2.0, which are implicit in the way that we're using social media and which are really promoting corporate capital interests. Those claims of optimism that are built into the way that Web 2.0 is talked about. And that word commodity that I use to describe Christmas is very fundamental to our discussion today. It's a term that comes from Karl Marx. Commodity, commodification is another word that is used. Marx referred to commodity structures. Commodity structures appearing as a natural part of society when in fact they're not natural. They're created to enhance profit-making initiatives by large global corporate structures. And so something like purchasing a stocking is treated as a normal ideology. You see stockings on your Facebook. If you look at one stocking online on Google, there are going to be stockings popping up on your social media. And it's part of the ideology of capitalism to say that, hey, this is normal. It's normal. Well, no, it's not normal. What's normal is putting a pin through a sock. Yeah, to express the true original intention of that gesture. What's normal is a sock. It's not purchasing a stocking, which is again part of the money-making apparatus of social media. So yeah, we're hitting Christmas here, but again, we're trying to gain insight. So we're going to continue on with these ideas. Let's talk about social media now. Our next heading is social media participation as ideology. We already talked about participation in a previous chapter and what that truly does involve. And in this chapter, Fuchs doesn't take on any one particular author and take them down like he did the last couple, but he still continues to take down certain optimistic ideas. We said we're going to do that. We have to look at what is presented as natural, but it's not. What is presented as optimistic, but it's not necessarily optimistic. And one of the optimistic frameworks that you get into when you read about what people are saying about Web 2.0 and all it offers with everything that can be shared and the opportunities for democracy is you find a technological determinism there. It's a technological determinism saying that new technology is going to free us up. New technology is going to make us more democratic. New technology is going to help us achieve social justice. New technology is going to help us overthrow dictatorships. And it misses the mark. It misses the mark. It misses the mark because the use of the term participation has to involve participatory democracy. It has to involve democratic participation. And democratic participation is taking the idea of democracy, which many of us think of as, oh, it's exercising a vote at the voting booth. That's democracy in action. We can all vote, even though we don't. Just barely more than 50% of eligible voters in the U.S. do. A good example of this overall systematic failure that we're talking about here. But the idea is that democracy has to go beyond voting. It has to be extended to the economy. There has to be a democracy in the economy. There has to be fairness in the players that are trying to make profit. There has to be democracy also in culture. That cultures have to have equal access to social media. Does country culture, country music culture, I should say, have the same access as rap music culture to social media? I mean, it depends on what social media, but it's asking that question. Democracy has to be extended beyond voting to the economy, to the culture, and to the household. To the household. Do the men and the women have equal household decision-making authority? This is what democracy truly is about. It's participatory democracy. It's extending it. It's breaking it out of these tiny confines of just voting. And that includes, by the way, it includes questioning whether democracy and capitalism are even compatible. It's an interesting question that we never ask unless we're applying a critical theory. And that's what we're doing in this class. Are they even compatible, democracy and capitalism? That's a question that we're going to be addressing in future chapters. Hold on to the question for now. Now let's go into specific media. I promised that we would be doing that. Let's talk about specific media. And Fuchs is wanting to highlight how participation is limited in these media. He takes on YouTube. Which he discussed a bit in the last chapter. He talks about the asymmetries. There's a word that we've introduced before, the asymmetries. We talked about asymmetry of power. He talks about asymmetries in terms of visibility and attention. Who are the most watched people on YouTube? Is it the average person? The average person has the ability to do that. Is it a musician trying to break through, putting their stuff out there, trying to get signed by a record label? Is it a college student making music? Is it a rapper? My son's up in his room all the time rapping. Is he going to receive attention? Is he going to be part of that attention economy? Is he going to receive visibility on YouTube? Fuchs' research says no. He looked at the 10 most viewed videos on YouTube. Granted, it was the year 2015. 10 most viewed videos, and he found that they were all corporation videos. Most of them were music videos put out by record labels like Universal. Yeah, none of them were political speeches. And that's Fuchs' point. Politics pushed out in a corporate logic media structure, a corporate logic that says you got to buy your stocking rather than make it in the real tradition of a Christmas stocking. Now let's go on to the limits of Facebook. Facebook, similar situation here. Most of the content is branding, is consumer-oriented content that's popping up in what people are talking about. It's not that a person who takes a vacation to the Grand Canyon is selling the Grand Canyon per sale, but in a sense, they're commodifying it. They're making that trip accessible. And along the way, whatever they're talking about doing, they're talking about things that can be purchased. And those things that they're talking about are being collected by the big data companies and then refashioned into content that is then targeted to the people who may have an interest as indicated by their social media behavior. And so when you look at Facebook, it's dominated by companies and brands. It's not dominated by individual thinkers. You're not going to see Noam Chomsky on there. Noam Chomsky? Who's Noam Chomsky? Oh, he just happens to be probably the greatest thinker, at least according to the New York Times, in the 20th century, the 21st century. Sorry, I should say, no, 20th century. He goes back into the 1900s. Greatest thinker. Yeah, he goes around giving speeches. He's a writer. He's published a lot of research on structures of language and how the language itself limits us. Like you say, I love you. In English, it's I'm doing something to you. You say je t'adore in French, it's I, you, love. It's me, you together, and then we share love just by virtue of the structure of the sentence. All right, getting a little bit off tangent there, but you don't know about Noam Chomsky. He's not on Facebook. Who's on Facebook? Yeah, Facebook is celebrities, presidents, candidates running for office, buying ads. Same with Twitter. Same with Instagram. Same with all social media. It's dominated by people who are reinforcing the corporate profit-making paradigm. Same with Google. Next thing that Fuchs talked about is Google. Google, the limits of searching on Google. He studied the top search words on Google, and none of them contain political topics. People are not searching to talk about politics. 7 out of the top 10 searches were for entertainment-oriented subjects, and only 1 out of the 10 was for a natural disaster, a catastrophe. I think it was a hurricane. That's what people are actually using Google for. They're not using it for cooperation. They're not using it for enlightenment. People are not using it according to the most popular things it's being used for. It's limiting. It's not participatory democracy. It's not being extended to other realms. Same with Twitter. That's what he goes on to next. He talks about the limitations of the character length, which has been doubled to 280 words now. I mean, Donald Trump, he dominates Twitter. He's on my Twitter feed. I mean, I feel like I have to study him. It's a paradigm shift in the way that presidential communication is taking place. It's moved out from legacy media, out from underneath legacy media in traditional press conferences and broadcasts of news. That still exists, but it's now a direct access from whoever's writing Donald Trump's tweets. We don't know that it's always him, and he's always tweeting and dominating Twitter. And in fact, 9 of the 10 most followed people on Twitter, according to Fuchs research, are entertainers. That's how Twitter was devised, to give you access to an entertainer's life. We have Pinterest. The next one, we haven't said anything about Pinterest in this class. That's the platform mostly targeted towards females. It's for like a pin like a bulletin board. It's like a scrapbook. That's the idea of it. You're pinning recipes. You're pinning ways of making crafts. I'm sure it's evolved past when I last took a look at it, but it's dominated again by fashion companies and design companies and marketing services. It's not by individual people. It's all by the players are all extensions of the corporate structure, the capitalist making structure. So now let's move on to putting these into larger ideas. The next category that we're going to use to do that is called corporate colonization. Corporate colonization of social media. There's an interesting word. It's all part of critical theory, this kind of hard-hitting language, because you know what a colony was, right? That's where a European power, enacted slavery, mostly unto African nations, but also in Central and Southern America as well. Native Americans also colonized. I mean, culture pushed down, subjugated to the new culture comes in. New school systems, new education system, new economic system. Using that word, Fuchs says that corporations have colonized the internet, that it had the potential to become something else, but they have been colonized, been taken over by profit makers. The internet is primarily capitalist. It's primarily about money making. We expect to get on for free, and that's what we sacrifice. We sacrifice a lot of else so that we can get it for free, but it's based on an advertising system. And you can read in this chapter, it goes into depth about how Facebook receives ad revenue and about how social media in general is making money, and we'll get into that. So let's talk about the colonization a little bit more. Social media is not necessarily exclusively commercial. There is non-commercial social media. We're on D2L. Is non-commercial social media, but they're tiny pockets in the social media universe. We're going to talk about more later in the chapter, so we'll save those as he talks about ideal non-commercial public service social media. Interesting concept, right? Have you ever even thought about that, public service social media? Because what has happened is corporations and the capitalist logic have colonized social media, the capitalist logic that you're scrambling to work as many hours as you can so that you can be perceived as showing the right amount of love through the Christmas gifts that you're presenting to somebody else, and the right amount of care and forethought, and the right amount of, in some cases, how much you've spent, and in some cases even measuring that to how much you spent on somebody else or how much has been spent on you. And even we do things like see of Christmas as a time to reward ourselves. Oh, everybody else has got me something, I'm going to get myself something too. It's an amazing, the logic that has been built into our way of thinking as being a natural way of approaching a holiday. Meanwhile, the credit cards, they're not suggesting this is natural. The credit card debt, no, wait till January hits. There's going to be a big hangover amongst the American population. There always is. And the electric bills are coming in for extra heating, and January is tough. And so it's not natural necessarily. There is a Frankfurt philosopher we have not mentioned yet. I want to introduce him now. He's called Jürgen Habermas. Jürgen Habermas. And he says that when you have an economic system based on advertising that's in a communication system, as we have in legacy media like TV, radio, all based on advertising, and social media, which we're establishing, what it does is it depoliticizes the public. Habermas says it depoliticizes the public. Yeah, it takes politics away from the public as being of interest or being accessible or being noble, being something of interest. Most people are turned off by politics, especially today. Like, it sucks. The people are so biased. You're either on one side or not. You're either for Trump or against Trump. There's no in between. That's the way that most people feel today, and that's why you have, that's not the only reason, but again, not much more than 50% of the eligible voting public are voting during an election. So why is that? Politics are taken out of the equation automatically because our social media, as is our legacy media, our profit-making system. Here's what Habermas says. He says, what happens is you get tabloidization. You get tabloidization in a profit-making system based on advertising. Specifically, advertising is what causes this. Tabloidization is where reporting facts as human interest stories, mixing information with entertainment, arranging material episodically, that means in series so that you get hooked and you have to come back, breaking down complex relationships into smaller fragments, solving a whole complex problem in a half-hour sitcom episode, for example. All of this comes together to form a syndrome that works to depoliticize public communication. Depoliticize public communication. There's an interesting thought there that there should be communication that's public, that we have in the interest of all of us, that we talk about everything from taxes to safety in our neighborhoods to economic opportunity to the youth. We should be talking about things as a whole. It's in everybody's interest. But when you have advertising creeping into the system, it becomes about commodifying. It becomes about purchasing things. It doesn't become about talking about things. And that's what's going on here. It's the economic logic and the tabloidization that occurs. So Facebook and Twitter are at the forefront of our social media. And when we look at them together as what they have in common, they're very much me media. They're about getting people to express themselves individually, not collectivistically, individually. Go onto Facebook, go onto Twitter, go onto Instagram, go onto Snapchat. Again, how many times do you see people making a post? This is what I think. I. And then see the responses, similar comments. I. Lots of I's. Not we. It's not a we media. It's an I media. That is the economic model people want to express. They're lonely. It's one reason. I'm actually writing a chapter on social media for a book. I have to submit the chapter by the summer, and it's going to be on why people post on social media. I'm going to be doing a psychosocial analysis, and that's loneliness is going to be at the core, I'm quite sure. Loneliness and recognition, posting to get recognized. There is a feeling out there that Facebook knows exists, and they want to tap into that because it sucks out the data that they can use for advertising. So they're at the forefront of the model that we have out there, which means that the other media copy that. Twitter's trying to copy that same thing. What we do not have are mediated public spaces on social media. I mean, they're out there in tiny little chat groups and fan groups within Facebook. I belong to a Rolling Stones fan group. Other people belong to a sports fans group. They have a little micro argument within that tiny community. But in terms of having a sphere, A sphere, which is what Jürgen Habermas used to describe that sphere, like this round thing that has, a lot of depth to it, a place where people can meet in the virtual world and discuss things. There is not that in social media. It's all going onto corporate platforms to do that. Where could you go right now to be commercial free on social media? D2L. Probably that's about your only one. When we talk about a neoliberal society, as we've talked about before, liberal meaning government interference, it's actually liberal. The concept of liberal, which is freedoms of association and assembly. That means associating with who you want and also getting together where you want. It's those freedoms that are actually being suspended by social media. Yeah, because of all the different blocks that you need to get in to belong to different interest groups and passwords. And then all the dissuading factors of joining a group, because then you're going to be asked for money all the time. Yeah, these rights that are part of the liberal outlook that we have in our country, free from government interference, which was then became neoliberal when it was combined with capitalism in the marketplace. Yeah, so we need to look at, Fuchs says, because of that, we need to look at class exploitation and what's known as surplus value, which is a very difficult concept to grasp, and that's what we're going to talk about now. It's all coming out of Marx, those three things: class, exploitation, and surplus value. That's a term that you have to keep going over and over in your head to try and grasp. Let's talk about it under the heading Cycle of Capital Accumulation. Cycle of Capital Accumulation. Here's what it's all about. Karl Marx wrote that book. He wrote a book called Capital, A Critique of Political Economy. In the 1800s, when manufacturing was out of control, industrialization. But his book is still meaningful today. He predicted many things, including the internet is talked about in some of his work, at least as being a global network of capitalism. But what he talked about, which comes into play right now, is accumulation of capital. The accumulation of capital. What is capital? It's in our term, capitalism. But can you explain it? You're growing up in a capitalist society. Can you explain it? Go ahead. What does it mean? Capital is the accumulation of wealth, which can be money, it can be investments, it can be time, it can be prestige, it can be status. It's the accumulation of wealth. And capitalists do that by buying labor and the means to production. They do that by buying labor. You're going to work at a restaurant today. Your labor is being sold to the restaurant. They are purchasing your labor for $1.65 an hour, however much they pay waiters and waitresses, servers these days. They are purchasing that, but they also own the means to production. They own all the cooking stuff in the kitchen. They own all the vegetables, all the meats, all the cheeses, all the desserts. They own the lighting fixtures. They own the building. So there's two things that capitalists purchase and own to produce something that's going to make money. They buy labor, and then they also own the means to production. And that there are actually two spheres of capital accumulation. There's that word again. There's two spheres that it goes on. There's the circulation sphere. In the circulation sphere, you have capital transforming its value form. Capital is transforming its value form. We're getting heavy here, right? Don't be fooled. This is a pretty simple concept. It's when you want to have value with something. Things have value and cash has value. You can have gold. Gold has value. You can have stocks. Stocks have value. You can have cash. Cash has value. You can have a coat. If a person really wants a coat, that has value. Things you can trade. I know a person, I took him to Mazatlan, Mexico, and of course he sold his sneakers down there. They had a huge value. So this is the first sphere of accumulation. It's a circulation sphere where capital is being transformed in a capitalist system. Then there is also a second sphere. The second sphere of accumulation, that's called the sphere of production. And in this sphere, the sphere of production, the new good is what is being produced. It's that meal that's made at a restaurant that comes out on the server's table. It's that sneaker that comes out of that factory. It's that plastic pen that comes out of a factory. That's the second sphere of capital accumulation. But this value also has the labor value added into it because it took the labor to produce that pen or that plate. It took labor by two people, the cook and the server. And sometimes a pantry person making the salad to put 3 people, that labor is added into the value of that meal that you're purchasing. And so what helps capitalists is when they have either unpaid labor, which the book talks about constantly, or underpaid labor. which the book unfortunately neglects. Underpaid labor is really more common in traditional industries, not in social media. That's not what we're talking about today, but both of them generate surplus value, generate more value to the company, which becomes profit, generates value beyond what it's costing the company to produce things. That is surplus value. That's profit. So if you have unpaid labor or underpaid labor, it's generating more profit. Capitalists want to see underpaid labor. It's part of the equation. Capitalists own the means of the production and they own the profit. It's not up to the workers. The workers are selling their labor. That's it. And so you can gather that that word exploitation is referring to this. Exploitation is exploiting those workers on the internet who are working for free. They are the you and the me. I'm working for free right now. I'm putting a video on YouTube. Somebody's going to make money off of this. I don't know who yet. Somebody will, and I'll never find out. It's exploitation of my labor. But of course, I'm choosing to do it. I'm choosing to do it. You're choosing to go on Twitter. You're choosing to post something on, you're choosing to put your Christmas tree on Instagram. But that's not really the point here. We're still being exploited. All right, so now let's move on to capital accumulation and social media. And there are different dimensions that we want to talk about with capital accumulation and social media. The first is prosumption. That is not a new term, by the way, the prosumer. That was invented by a futurist. His name was Alvin Toffler in the 1970s. And he talked about the future as being, he's one of these Web 2.0 positive talkers. It's rosy. We're going to be able to look into the future and it's going to be he didn't all talk about the future as all being pleasant, but he generally talked about the promise of it. But what he did was he overlooked the fact that in prosumption, what's happening is you are outsourcing the workers. You're taking jobs away from people. It's not just that you're being paid for free. It's also you're taking jobs away from people who could be employed by Facebook and Google and Twitter and Google Plus and Pinterest. You could have employees who are being paid to create content. They don't. They're outsourcing that to you who's doing it for free, and it's taking away jobs. And Alvin Toffler did not look at that. And besides, prosumerism is just one dimension of capitalism. Capitalism has many facets it gets into your life. There's the whole financing side of capitalism. Almost every one of you in this class have a cell phone. Almost every single one of you have a cell phone that's being financed by a capitalist corporation. You are paying extra for that monthly fee to finance the cell phone that you're purchasing from Verizon or AT&T. That's just another example. Then you have insurance, you have warranty programs. I mean, capitalism comes at you from so many different directions. So prosumerism is just one tiny piece of it. There's an author that I want to bring up now that Fuchs cites also, Dallas Smythe, and he wrote a book called The Audience, Commodity, and Internet Prosumer Commodification. His book was called Communications, Blind Spot of Western Marxism. Much better title. Communications, you can tell I haven't read it, but it's on my list. Communications, Blind Spot of Western Marxism. And what his point is that Marxism, particularly as it's been practiced in the U.S., is not focused on communication enough. It's not focused on communication enough, and particularly that when you have an equation that we have in the way that our media operate financially, it's not really about media selling a TV show to the public. It's not, I watched the Eagles game yesterday. I waited and waited. Couldn't wait for that game. Glad they won that game. I was really eager there to watch that game. I felt like, I think it was Fox. Fox delivered the product to me. I was really excited. That's not what's going on here. What is going on here, according to Smythe, is the audience is the product. The audience is the commodity. The audience is a commodified audience, the commodity audience. Yeah, it's I can deliver to Doritos potato chips an audience of males that is going to be the biggest audience out of any TV program during this Eagles game. And that audience of males is going to be 35 to 54. And that's me. And I ate Doritos during the game. And they would have got me with that commercial if I had Doritos, or I would have thought about it. So that's what's happening here. It's the audience is being sold. I'm being sold. You're being sold to Doritos and whoever else is advertising. That's what's going on here. But in the old legacy media, which is where this is happening also, you can have a TV audience being sold, like I just gave you an example. It's much different than the internet audience because the internet audience is much more active. These are prosumers. These are people who are also creating the content and sharing the content. And as a result, they are producing meanings for the content. They are surveying others. They are seeing when other people are logged on. They are seeing what other people are posting and following what they're posting. You are surveying others. Think about that. People are being targeted. targeted. It's not blanket advertising. Blanket advertising, it comes on television. It's on whoever's TV is on the Eagles right now. You're seeing a Doritos commercial. Advertising on social media is targeted. When my IP address appears on the big World Wide Web, that ad is waiting for me to come at me with Doritos. That's what target advertising is all about. And then also you have the accumulation of friends. Yeah, just like we accumulate capital, you're trying to accumulate friends because there is a capital that comes with that friendship group that you have. Capital that may help you with a job later in life, may help you with a piece of advice, a hard time in your life. Who knows? We accumulate capital in our friends as well. All right, now let's go on to capital accumulation on social media as it occurs through advertising. Through advertising, capital accumulation takes place because what you have is you have waged employees who are creating part of the surplus value, but the rest of the employees, the people like you and me who are free, are not. There are people working for Facebook. There are people working for Twitter. There are people working for Amazon and Wikipedia and every really other entity out there that's on the internet that has a way of communicating on it, making it a social medium. But the vast majority of content is created by users who are not paid. And in exchange, the way that we're bought off is we think it's okay because we get free access. We don't want to pay for something, even if it meant no advertising. We want it for free. And also, it allows us to produce the content and to, I said, accumulate friends. Now I'd like to move to the law of value. The law of value, it's a term that we've used in terms of surplus value. And this law of value, coming out of Marx, this law of value is that the greater the time it takes to produce something, the greater the value that it has. That's why a university degree has more importance than a community college degree. It's 4 years of study. The greater the time, the greater the value. And that, when applied to social media, means the more time on social media, the more data you're supplying, therefore the more value you have to Facebook and to Google and to Twitter. So the time dimension plays a big role in the cost of an ad, because ads are being targeted at people in terms of their specific use of social media. And actually you are paying, if you're an advertiser, every time somebody clicks through. That's what you are paying. The average is 1 penny on Facebook. If you click through to a Wendy's restaurant ad because there's a coupon for a new burger, 1 penny is going to Facebook, and that penny is being paid by Wendy's. But in return, they're making money off of you when you go to buy whatever it is that you're buying when you go to Wendy's. And so this is the law of value in place there. And that on Facebook and other platforms, YouTube as well, you have a bidding process that also takes place for advertisers where you can bid for how much you will pay for 1 click. I'm going to go above 1 penny. I'm a really big company. I'm Verizon. I'm going to go up to 1.2 cents. And I'm going to bid and see if I beat out Geico Insurance, who's also bidding for that online ad. And so this is the way that advertising takes place. And that means, in terms of an attention economy, that the higher the attention time, the higher the profits will be for Facebook and Google.